เมื่อมองดูนกพกพินบินลับไปเมื่อมองสายชนถึงไหลริน
People were screaming and running down the sidewalk, and then were blowing and tumbling like leaves in the wind as he watched them, as people go like this, as they were swooshed down the street from the blast. And then the first people to come in started coming into his emergency room, and he was on duty 24 hours a day for 20 days. He treated the first responders for emergency care. He treated people who just stumbled in right off the street right then and there. Okay? And he won like a president's award and a national award, top ER doc, da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and then a year later he quit the business. PTSD. Okay? Quit the business. Because he said he did enough emergency care to last a lifetime. Now it's somebody else's turn. Okay? But here's the thing. Joe says 7 out of 10 people on the ventilator, if they're critical care, they don't survive. That's without COVID. That's normal. That's normal. Okay? You can be perfectly healthy on a ventilator and not survive. No comorbidity. Just take a perfectly healthy person and put them on a ventilator, and there's a high risk that they won't survive. Okay? And that they will have this thrombosis. They will have this damage to the lungs because the alveoli of the lungs are so fine. Like if you look at them on a microscope, and you can see slides, you can look up microscopic slides of lung tissue alveoli. Okay? It's really easy to see. Okay? They are so, you can see through them. Well, first of all, they're so thin you can see through them. Okay? That's number one. That's a problem. You know, like on a slide, that's a problem because the sample is so thin that when you do the aniline dye, you can't see what you just dyed because you just obscured the tissue with the aniline dye. So you got to really be careful how much and what kind of dye you use to even see this stuff on a slide, right? And that it's so sensitive to pressure, that's their whole thing, that's the osmotic membrane. The alveoli's tissue is meant to exchange gas. To exchange gas right through it. Okay? In real time. It's very sensitive to pressure. Slight little bit of pressure outside of its nominal design for pressure, and they go like that. Pop. And the second they pop, that's an injury. Okay? And then if you look at a cross-section of lung tissue, you'll see that it has this massive amount of microscopic capillary blood supply. Microscopic. Because that's how the air, the oxygen from the alveoli gets into the bloodstream. Directly. So the second you blow up an alveoli, okay, it bleeds. That does two things. One, that creates clotting, which can be which is immediately accessible to blood supply. So you can immediately get blood clots back into the capillary system of the lung, which can lead to thrombosis, which can lead to devastating injury. And that's actually what most people die from on the ventilator, is this catastrophic injury to the lung tissue itself. It bleeds out. The blood is instantly back into the blood supply because there's not 1 degree of separation from the alveoli to capillary blood supply. Okay? And you get a clot, and depending on where that clot goes, and how large it is, and then you also have this thing where you may have many blood clots that aggregate together. Many, not just one, many. Enough to shut off a critical blood supply, an artery or a vein. Shut it off. And in the next moment, you're on your way to being dead. Okay? So Now, Joe says this about normal, healthy people being ventilated, can have this injury and can die. That's why we don't experiment with ventilators on normal, healthy people, because there's a risk of death every single time you intubate. Every single time there's a risk of death. So we don't do it on healthy people. Okay? All right, go ahead.
So this one's a little bit layered, but this is actually related to the video that we watched.
Yep, good.
So one of the claims that was made in the video was in regards to switching to a plant-based diet will help with conditions such as lupus and multiple sclerosis.
Correct.
Because they strengthen the immune system. But
Well, that's one reason. That's not the only reason.
but knowing that those are autoimmune conditions, like an overly active, like multiple sclerosis affecting like the myelin sheath and in nerves, wouldn't strengthening the immune system increase or exacerbate that condition? Because if you have an overactive immune response causing this condition,
Yeah.
wouldn't strengthening the immune system make these conditions worse? And is
Absolutely
this
not.
idiopathic?
Absolutely not. Okay? Because again, you're talking about a condition, you're not talking about a cause. Okay? So, no. Okay, let me say it another way. Let me ask you a question. What is the cause of multiple sclerosis?
It is overactive immune
No. That's a symptom. That's not a cause.
Well, no, that is the cause. It is
Nope,
the cause.
that's not a cause. That's a symptom.
Okay, so then
By definition, that's a symptom. So you can't use a symptom as a cause.
So multiple sclerosis causes an
And let me
overactive
explain to you why. I want to help you understand. It's a good question he's asking, by the way. Okay? And it's the kind of scuttlebutt that people say. Even some quasi-medical people will say this. Okay? And people just nod their head and they go, oh, it's caused by overactive immune system. Your body's attacking itself. Blah, blah, blah. Okay? That's a symptom. That's not a cause.
What's the cause in your
Okay? Go ahead, Maureen.
Malnutrition is the cause of multiple sclerosis?
Malnutrition. And let me explain the rabbit hole, okay? Or no, not the rabbit hole, the dog chasing its tail. Multiple sclerosis is, if you say multiple sclerosis is caused by an overactive immune system, you can't get there from here. And the reason why is you cannot cause MS by overstimulating someone's immune system.
Okay.
Cannot.
Well, isn't it genetic?
No.
Okay.
No, it's
So
not.
it's-
No, wait. Don't jump too far ahead. Settle in. Understand what I just said.
Okay.
Take it in. Okay? If an overactive immune system, whatever that is, that's, by the way, that's a unicorn, but we'll come back to that later.
Okay.
As in, there's no such thing. But, okay. So if, though, I'm saying give the benefit of the doubt to the hoople heads who say overactive immune system causes MS. We still got a bar? Okay. Then you should be able to take a healthy person, overstimulate their immune system, because we know how to stimulate the immune system, so I could easily do it. I could arrange a circumstance to overstimulate your immune system.
How would you do that?
That's not the question. And if I did that, would you have, or would you come down with MS? And what do you think is the percentage of chance that you would come down with MS? And the answer is zip, zilch, zero. You can't do it. See, the problem, understanding cause is a naturopathic thing. We treat cause. We don't primarily treat symptom. Western medical science is about addressing symptomology as a fetish, the fetish of symptoms. And it's such a fetish, and how we know it's a fetish is because it's quite common in quasi-medical or allopathic medical conversations to allude to symptoms as even not just symptoms of an imbalance, but the actual cause of the imbalance. When there's no proof, because correlation does not equal causation. Even if you said that people with MS have been found to have a certain percentage of them, an overactive, and I would love to see the criteria for overactive immune system, And you say, okay, there's a correlation. These people have overactive immune system and they have MS. Okay, that's a correlation. It's not a cause relationship. Causal means if I take a healthy person and overstimulate according to the criteria of determining what is an overactive immune system, but intentionally cause you to have that you would then develop MS. And then by, here's the clinker, taking you off of the overactive immune system, in other words, reducing your immune system function, thus curing your MS. It's never happened. Not clinically, not once, not anywhere in the world has that actually happened. Okay? All right, peace be with you. Hang on to it for a second.
I got you. I'll hang on to it, don't worry.
Okay, because I want to hear from some other people. Okay? Yes?
So when we hear the tragic stories of people losing like multiple members of their family in the
Yes.
surrounding area,
Yes, so sad.
so sad. So I think back to the videos.
And I'm not being facetious, by the way. I know people really believe this. I have a really good friend who hates me now because I told him his mother didn't die of corona. He won't talk to me anymore because he knows she died from corona. Okay, even though she was in her middle to late 80s with obese, chronic heart disease for 40 years, with respiratory problems for 20 years, smoker, in other words, but not one comorbidity, not one premorbidity, but let's say 8 or 10, was in a nursing home already, was then isolated, put on a ventilator when she tested positive for COVID, and then a couple days later she died. It's really sad. I'm so sorry to even know, because I love this guy. I've known him for quite a while, and I really respect him. And he's a Native American elder, but him and his wife, they hate me now. Okay, I mean, they flat out tell me they hate me. I'm a disgusting person because I told them that Mom didn't die from COVID. And go ahead.
So my question is, so when you have like a diverse group of families, so they live like in the same area, or
Yeah.
they might even live in the same household.
Yes.
So I think back to what I learned here about the nutrition, about the environment,
Correct.
all the environmental factors.
Correct.
They could have all possibly received the same treatment in the hospital.
Correct.
Which led to the death. So when communicating with others, I'm finding like a struggle in trying to explain this in
I
a
bet.
way that doesn't incite madness. Basically,
I know.
you
I know.
So, can you help?
So there's no simple answer,
Yeah.
and I'm gonna just be as honest as I can be. I don't have the simple answer. I just told you about how one of my best friends has accused me of being a terrorist,
Right.
because I tried to explain to him that, see, nobody wants to hear that Mom was going to die anyway.
Right. Or the
Nope.
19-year-old.
Nobody wants to hear that. Or go ahead.
Kappa imbalance.
Or kappa imbalance. Nobody wants to hear that. Nobody wants to hear that. Why? Because of the pervasive brainwashing and propaganda. But I want to put this in some criteria. It didn't start with Corona. It didn't start with COVID. In fact, COVID is incidental, literally, to the process of propaganda of, one, separating people from the knowledge of the true medicine, which is based always on nature, and always has been for the last 10,000 years of human history. There wouldn't have been a Roman Empire if they didn't have effective medicine. There wouldn't have been a Mughal Empire in India if they didn't have effective medicine. There wouldn't have been a Majapahit Buddhist Empire for 1,000 years if they didn't have effective medicine. There wouldn't have been, there wouldn't have been in Egypt. There wouldn't have been, wouldn't have been. So there was. And it's only in our grandparents' lifetime, that's how recent it is, that there's been an organized movement of a elite society to divest the world from belief in true medicine and belief in natural medicine. And it's only in our grandparents' lifetime. So we're literally talking about, started in the late 1800s with the rise of allopathy in England, not in the United States, because there were English doctors who came to the U.S. who brought the allopathy to the U.S., okay? Because Harvard wasn't teaching allopathy until the 1930s. Harvard, if you can get a hold of a Harvard medical documents, the textbooks that they actually used for Harvard medical doctors, right through the 1900, 1910, 1918, whatnot, 90% of the information in those textbooks is natural medicine and homeopathy. Herbology, aromatherapy, biochemic salts. I have some of these books. And I have to say, I'm proud to say I physically have them. Okay, so it's not just like even a digital copy. And I don't bring them out much because they were made in 1800 and 1900 and they kind of fall apart if you handle them too much. But I did buy a large format scanner, which I am, between all the other projects I'm doing, I am scanning them. And then once I do, like my People's book, which is like the Kellogg manual for the original Kellogg Institute in Battle Creek, Michigan, I will give it to you. Once I finish scanning it, I will give it to you. So you can hear Dr. Kellogg in his own words describing how he's curing cancer and polio and diphtheria and tuberculosis using natural medicine. And how richest people in the world are coming from all over the world to Battle Creek, Michigan to get their tuberculosis cured, and he does. No drugs.
Wasn't there a movie about that?
But there's some, The Road to Wellness, with George C. Scott. It's not accurate, you know, because but he was a real doctor. He had a real clinic, and he really believed what he was teaching. And there were hospitals and clinics all over the world that emulated his success. See, they didn't want to emulate the people who are the quacks who are failing. Why would you want to do that? Why would you want to build a hospital in Switzerland to copy what an American doctor is doing in Battle Creek, Michigan, if he's a complete failure? Why would you do that? Well, you wouldn't. And they didn't. And some of those clinics outside the U.S., for example, are still in operation today. Okay, that's another thing. Why would they have a clinic that's been practicing natural medicine for 100 years? And it's still a first-class clinic and hospital and retreat and whatnot today. Why would you have that if it didn't work? Why would rich people fly from all over the world to your clinic to get the cure if somebody wasn't getting better? Why would they do that? Okay? In my opinion, they wouldn't. But let me come back to this question. All right, so the issue of this conversation started with your grandma, and that your grandma was popularly educated in the popular media. At the time, it would have been newspaper bulletins, certain books. But for example, when the Ford Foundation created the Pasteur Institute and funded Louis Pasteur's research and the development of the Pasteur laboratories in France and then eventually in other places, even in Europe, England, America, Germany, and so on. When Henry Ford funded Louis Pasteur to expand his business on the condition that what he was developing in his laboratory were chemicals that could be used as medicine based entirely on petroleum derivatives. In other words, things to do with crude oil. And Louis Pasteur bought into it. Well, why? Because he was paid to buy into it. He was given millions of dollars to exclusively research how you can take crude oil and turn it into a medicine like an antibiotic, like a penicillin. Okay? And then when he had his first successful drug that didn't just kill everybody that was given it, okay, Henry Ford and the Ford Foundation purchased front page newspaper advertisements, on every newspaper that they could identify on the planet Earth in 1 year. Front page. The cure for all diseases. Disease over. Headlines, cancer over. Disease over. Infections over. All infectious disease over, over, over. And then they hired people to travel around the world as PR people to market this new drug to governments. And they bought it because they paid them to buy it, which is kind of crazy. You think, what? They went to a country and they paid them to buy drugs? It's like, yeah. Well, how do you make money from that? Well, 100 years later, you have trillions of dollars of income that you made from that. That's how you do it. They had the long view. We'll pay you now because we're going to profit later. Okay? And at the same time, they created entities and agencies, hired public relations people, we even know their names, we know the companies, hired public relations people to disparage all natural medicine, all traditional medicine, all indigenous medicine, and they invented the term quack. Ford Foundation invented the term quack because they wanted to come up with a catchy phrase. It's marketing. We want a catchy phrase that's easy to remember, rolls off the tongue, that can sound either silly or critically disparaging all at the same time. And that's the way we're going to do it. We weaponize this word, and then what we do is we say everything that's not modern and scientific in medicine. Modern and scientific means chemical, pharmaceutical drugs, unproven surgeries, okay, and using, like Madame Curie, who virtually everybody in her office died from radiation exposure, taking this new radioactive isotope that had been isolated called radium, okay, and then coming up with ways to use it for medicine. So what a wacky idea. You've just created one of the most isolated, because it exists in nature. But what she did was she concentrated it for the first time into a dose where you could actually see it. But of course, not knowing that if you could see it, it could kill you. That you're dead. Oh, wow, that is really pretty. Look, it glows in the dark. And then later you die of like 8 different kinds of cancer. Didn't know. They didn't understand it. And they just assumed this new thing was medicine. It kills everything on contact. Kills everything it contacts. And they thought, well, I can use this as medicine. I will use it to kill the bad things. Thinking that you can tell a radioactive isotope, you can teach a radioactive isotope good from bad. You can't. X-rays don't care. Radium doesn't care. Cesium-123 doesn't care. Strontium-64 doesn't care. They're radioactive isotopes. And so they came up with this idea with the chemical pharmaceuticals, and all petroleum is hazardous or inimical to organic life, right? It was supposed to stay. There's a reason why the oil is miles underground in prehistoric, is because nature separated us from the oil. Separated us by millions of years of evolution, separated us from oil. And only a few people in the world were ever exposed directly to oil or tar. And certainly refined tar, refined oil, which now has new problems that are inimical, right? Because they now are more easily absorbed. More easily absorbed, go directly into the bloodstream. Where if you put a drop of crude oil if you put a drop of crude oil on your big toe and count to 10, you can taste it in your mouth. That's pernicious. That's what we call pernicious. And that's, of course, they didn't understand that any derivative of petroleum will eventually destroy you, destroy your liver, will cause organ failure. They didn't understand that. Even penicillin. Because it's petroleum derivative. Synthetic penicillin. So, see, the misleading part is we say, like aspirin, oh, it's salicylic acid from the birch tree. Well, that's almost natural, doesn't it? Sound almost natural? But you've never had an aspirin that was made from salicylic acid from an extract of a birch tree. You've never had that in your life. Why? In 1890 or so, I forget the exact year, it was synthesized. The first petroleum derivative form of the aspirin molecule was synthesized, and since 1900, all aspirin is made from oil. And part of the problem with taking even baby aspirin is a toxicity effect from a petroleum derivative. Oh, you're not supposed to know that. Safe for babies. Safe for babies. And yet, even now, the American Association of Pediatric Physicians is saying you might need to scale back on the baby aspirin. Why? Because it causes liver failure. Because it could kill your child. Virus. Problem. Okay, I mentioned Pasteur. Pasteur came out of the Beauchamp School of Microbiology and Virology, the Beauchamp, Henri Beauchamp. Okay, Henri Beauchamp, his professor, he was the leading virologist, bug doctor in the world at that time. Number one. That's why that's why all this the germ theory of infection came out of that school. But the principles of that school were 100% against the germ theory of infection. 100% against it. 100% vociferously against it. And they had been running research and studies for many, many years before Louis Pasteur was ever Beauchamp was running studies before Pasteur graduated elementary school, okay? And he was the world's leading expert on infectious disease. And basically, what he came up with as a theory is that yes, there are bacteria, and yes, there might be viruses, but viruses do not cause disease. No virus causes a disease. No viruses cause disease. That was his principal theory that he was working at when Ford came in and hired Pasteur to quit the institution and go to work for him, okay? Because Pasteur wanted to say that germs caused infection, that bacteria caused infection, and that viruses caused infection. Beauchamp, as simply as I can state it, said that if germs caused infection, then why doesn't everyone have the infection who has the germs? In other words, if everyone has the germ, the bacteria that's say like tuberculosis or what?
Like typhoid Mary.
Like typhoid Mary. Why doesn't everyone, or why not half of everyone, or why not 30% of everyone who has that? And why do people who have higher germ levels not have the disease? And there are people who have hardly any discernible amount of that bacteria have the disease. And that they, and so that was his thing that he was researching, okay? And then as far as viruses go, he came up with the theory that viruses are bacteria and that it's a difference in the life cycle. In other words, at certain points in their life cycle, like we think of spore, we think of larval stage, we think of adult stage, and so on, and that what we define as bacteria, what we can actually see on a microscope, is an adult stage of the evolution of this creature, let's call it entity X, okay, which in one stage of its lifetime is too small to see with a microscope, and at another stage of its life, you can see it. And that the same entity, the same bug,
ยามเหงาเราถอนใจมองดูสายน้ำวนบินไป